Hello and welcome to the Love and Compassion podcast with Giselle. We believe that love and compassion have the power to heal our lives and our world. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more amazing content. Today, we're going to be talking about rethinking how we do business in a time of great upheaval. My guest today is Jeff Ma, who is the Director of Product Development at Culture Plus, host of the Love as a Business Strategy podcast, and best-selling author of Love as a Business Strategy. Coming up through a decade in the gaming industry, Jeff eventually found his niche in project management and agile coaching at Softway. As he continued working with teams and clients in Scrum and agile environments, however, he started seeing the stronger underlying importance of culture in truly high-functioning performing teams. Pushed by a combination of his own introspection, feedback from his colleagues, and a whole lot of uncomfortable practice, Jeff shifted headfirst into a new mission that he shares with his team to bring humanity back to the workplace. Nowadays, he's hyper-focused on helping people find a workplace culture that allows them to be their whole selves, their best selves. Jeff is leading the development of various products and tools that are crafted with the culture of love at its center. As a facilitator of Culture Rise and other experiences in the Culture Plus suite, he is also connecting and transforming leaders around the world, directly helping them to improve their mindsets, behaviors, and leadership capabilities. Please join me in welcoming Jeff. Hi, Jeff.
Hello, how are you, Giselle?
I'm doing great. I think this is a perfect conversation to have nowadays because I feel like the world is in a little bit of an upheaval when it comes to the economics, I think. People feel.
In terms of a lot of things, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So to get started, I wanted you to tell the audience a little bit about how you got started in this work.
Wow, so it's actually a lot of the book that we wrote, Love as a Business Strategy, centers around this change. But, I was just like anybody else working a kind of a job in a 9 to 5 kind of technology company called Softway, which I still do today, but Softway was very different back then. But basically, Softway went through an interesting change around 2016. It almost went out of business. And
Oh.
the story centers around our CEO, Mohammed, who's a co-author of the book as well. But it starts with Mohammed and it kind of grows into others. But the gist of it is
Mhm.
that when we're kind of in our worst moments where we had done mass layoffs, morale was at an all-time low,
Yeah,
things were not looking
been
good.
there.
Muhammad kind of had a moment of self-realization in which he went to actually a football game, a University of Houston football game, which he's a huge fan of.
Mm.
But they played a game that was really important. It was like their tenth straight victory with no losses that season, if they could
Ooh.
pull it off. But they were down by an insurmountable amount in the fourth quarter, and all the statistics showed that it was over. They had a 0.1% chance of winning, and basically people were already leaving that game, leaving that stadium, turning off their TVs. And Muhammad
Mm.
decided to stay in that game, and he witnessed one of the greatest comebacks in the history of the program. And they came back and won, and that really invigorated him to try to figure out what it is that makes a great team resilient like that. And that coach in particular, that was a rookie coach his first year, and he took a team of not particularly talented players and brought them to this level. He wanted to really understand that secret and what that was, and
Mm.
what he said, and what that coach said, Tom Herman, what he said in a press conference afterwards was that it was love that brought them through. And so Muhammad kind of went on this mission over the next, I would say we're still on it to this day, so over the next decade or more. But it sent us on a mission to uncover what that meant. And in that process, it shifted our focus. Not we still ran the business, but it shifted our focus also to how do we really impact culture? And we learned that that's through behaviors and mindsets and attitudes. And then we developed our pillars of love. So
Mhm.
anyways, that's the Cliff's Notes version of the story, but there's a lot more to it and a lot of things that we did wrong along the way. But ultimately, that brought us to where I am today, because I have my own personal journey within all that, which brought us to our mission to bring humanity back to the workplace. And that's what we do today.
Yeah. Oh, what a great story. One of the things that I really want to emphasize is that even tell my kids too, it's not over till it's over, right? Like it's not over till it's over. Unless it's over, it's not over. And so there's always an opportunity to turn it around. So I love that message.
Absolutely.
The second one is it's amazing to see like the whole concept of love sort of be spoken about in sports. Because as a mother who has kids in sports, as a partner to somebody who has been involved in sports leadership as well, it's not often something that people talk about. And there's seldom a conversation about love in business. And so, what were people's reactions when you were talking about, oh, we need to bring more love in a business?
Sure. I mean, if you go all the way back to when Muhammad first got this epiphany that he wanted to pursue love, because at the time he asked himself, do I love my team? Do I love the people of my company? And he said, no, if I'm honest, I don't. And so he went on this mission to practice loving and learn love. And so he did some weird stuff, like he would go around the office, like all of a sudden one of the first things he did, he gathered everybody together in a meeting. And we thought this was because we've been doing so poorly. We'd just done layoffs and things like that. We assumed that this was kind of the end.
Yeah.
This is the meeting of like,
Yeah,
we're all
yeah. The
work, the
beginning
doors
of
are,
the end.
yeah. But he got everyone together and he said, I just want everybody to know that I'm not giving up. I want to fight and I love you all. And we were all just like, what is happening? Like, who is this man?
Like, oh, what is
It
going
was
on with this
very
person? He's
strange.
finally lost it.
Yes, we thought he had gone off the deep end. And what followed though for days, then weeks, then months, because we thought it might just been a flavor of the month, or some sort of he read a book and he wants to, he's just trying something out. But
Yeah.
what started there and really hasn't ended since was this really big shift in how he looked at the world, but how he treated others. It wasn't this night and day overnight, like he just transformed to a different human, but he started doing a few things differently, just here and there. And then he would stick to that. He would start, like he had classically brought this giant Tupperware of food that his wife would cook for him. His wife is an incredible cook, and she makes this amazing stuff every day. He said he has this huge meal for lunch every day, but he started going around and just asking people around lunchtime, like if they had any food. And if they didn't, he would just like pour a huge portion of his food onto a plate and say, you got to eat this. It's really good. And it always was, but he would do this every day. And I think he skipped most lunches because he gave away all his food every day. Or people would be working late trying to hit a deadline. And as they're finishing up, they look up and he's still there and he ordered some like food or dinner or something to make sure people weren't, he'd just still be there. And he would leave like notes. He left me like a handwritten note that expressed appreciation, not just for me, but also for my family. And he said, here. And he put I think it was like $100 bill in there from his
Oh,
wallet.
wow.
And it was all crumpled up because it was in his wallet. But he said, here, this is for your wife and your kids. I want to make sure that you spend it on them this weekend. I know how much you've been away from home this last, and just stuff like little things like that really started, changing, our perception over time of just him and of him at the time, but not just him. We started kind of following suit. We all started thinking, hey, this is something that we can all practice and do together. And so it shifted our culture over time in a very, very potent way. I kind of forgot the question you originally asked as I went on
Oh,
this
no,
story.
this is perfect. This is perfect because I think it goes to show that it's contagious, right? Like fear is contagious, hate is contagious, love is contagious, right? And so if people start to demonstrate love, then that helps fill other people's buckets and then they have more to give. And so it sort of spreads. And I've always been so curious how the leadership really sets the tone for the whole business. But that's because people give their power away to the leadership. They determine that they're going to follow suit, right? So if they stop following suit, then the person would have no leadership whatsoever. You have a group of people who choose to follow a specific individual, right?
Yeah.
And so for the longest time, I would see, because I was in leadership, I was a director at a children's aid and had been management for many, many years and saw how people Like they had a little bit of the baby bird syndrome, which is like, tell me what to do, tell me how to act, right?
Hmm.
And so cultures that help breed that independence, that upliftment are really, really powerful. And I think in this time of great upheaval, I would hope that we would be moving towards those kinds of cultures that help elevate everyone. What are your thoughts on currently what's happening in the world in terms from the finance perspective? And what are some thoughts around how maybe this love culture could help us address some of them?
Oh,
It's a big
wow.
question.
Yeah, yeah. Just jump right into it. I wouldn't consider myself an expert in the field of economics and finance and war, especially at the world level, at the political
Fair
level, and
enough.
things like that. But love as a an important factor in business has been a driving kind of passion because I believe that business as a whole is driving the world. And so
Yeah.
if you're talking about finance, I mean, we can get political, we can all this, but if you look at kind of what's happening, ultimately, you know, money is is power. And it is, the power follows the money follows the power. And then you have, you know, to some extent, you have, government officials and you have all these things. And then you have the influence, right? You have the
Mm,
billionaires, you have the lobbyists, you have the special interests, you have money that makes a lot of decisions at the end of the day. And so when it comes down to it, I think what businesses choose to do and how business cultures evolve really impact the world at a scale that we don't really appreciate, right?
mm,
Like
yeah.
you call it something simple like ethical business or morals, but really there's more to it, I think.
Mhm.
And I think it does come down to change that's needed, but what that looks like is yet to be determined. And I think it's going to take time. But I don't know that we all agree on what that looks like, what that needs to be yet. And so I think the easy thing to do is to kind of, I guess, stick to what we do know, which is that I think love is a pretty universal language. And I think no
Yeah.
matter what you believe and what you fight for and kind of where you stand on different spectrums, I think there's this universal, you know, binding that love creates when we access it and when we allow it to. And I think that's going to be the key to us overcoming our differences and kind of the conflicts that are in play, because I think these conflicts are necessary for us as a society and as a people of this
Mm,
earth to get through. But I think everyone's looking for kind of a quick decision that everybody's happy with, something that happens that everybody agrees with. That's just not going to happen. And
mm,
so it's going to take work. And I think that work is not something people are willing to do unless we are doing it out of love. And so,
great.
you know, not a direct answer to your question, but definitely where I stand when it comes to those intersections.
So, speaking about the hard work that you have had to do as a culture for the company, what sort of outcomes have you guys seen, not only in your own company from using sort of the ethic of love, but also in the people that you've worked with and have coached?
Yeah. So when it comes to the work that we actually did for ourselves and that we do for our customers and our partners today, it very much comes from this very intentional place of discomfort. When we
Mm,
talk about love, earlier you called it a contagious element. We actually look at it as an environment that you create. And
mm,
so it's not that it spreads so much as you create a space in which it is the norm.
mm.
And
Beautiful.
we actually learned this in a very interesting way. It's because, Muhammad, he has a brother who manages our India office. We have an office in India, and his brother Taj, he manages that side of the business. And when I first visited India, I sat in a car that Taj drove. He drove me around, I think from the airport, and just for the first day, he drove me around. And what I learned about Taj very quickly was that he is a very, in my opinion, reckless driver, and I feared for my life at several times in those car rides. And but to him it's nothing, right? To him it's like
Mm,
this is how I drive, this is normal.
mm,
But to me it's like I feel like he's doing donuts, and this is like
mm.
in India where there's like no roads or lanes and lights or signals. People are just everywhere. You're surrounded by
Right.
people, but he's just driving like
Hmm.
however he wants. And so yeah, I was, that was my experience. And then we had this aha moment because he was kind of known for that behavior. And then he visited the US, and we decided, hey, let's see how he drives on US roads, see if he, how he pulls it off. And then, he gets in and he like puts on his seatbelt, and then he like drives to a stop sign and stops, and he looks both ways and he turns and uses his signal. And we were like, what is happening? We didn't even know he knew he had a turn signal because that's not used at all.
Right.
And we realized that he had changed his behavior almost
Mm,
overnight. And
hmm.
when we really asked why, it was, because people often say you can't, people often take a stance like you can't really change behavior because you're born a certain way, you're raised a certain way,
Yeah.
it's just how you are. And he was born and raised in India the way, and was taught to be able to drive that way. But as soon as you enter an environment where it's clear what the norms are, it's clear what's expected, it's clear what's right and wrong or what others expect of you, it becomes much easier to change something, even if it's not, quote unquote, natural to you. And it becomes natural to you when you
Mm.
spend time in that environment. And so we went about on a mission to truly alter our environment, not just change behavior here or there, but really how do we create environments that create change in the end in people for behavior, right? And so, yeah, I thought I'd share that anecdote because I think that that's
Mm.
similar to how we have to look at change in the workplace and change at a global scale. And if we talk about culture, I think it's imperative that we understand that we have to create this environment. And that doesn't just mean kind of creating a policy or a rule or using new fancy words about culture. I think it really is this element of how we individually treat each other and having this consciousness of like what impact that has on others.
Yeah, agreed. And it is an individual journey for us to change, right? And so, because individuals make up that culture. And so, like you said, putting a policy and procedure doesn't going to change. When you compare the policy versus the culture wins hands down. It doesn't
Yeah,
matter what policy you have, right? And I love that you said that, a lot of this journey has to do with discomfort because it's very true. Some of the most uncomfortable things that we feel are sort of the path towards growth, right?
absolutely.
What role do you feel fear has in some of the more negative business practices?
All of it. Love as a business strategy was written as we told stories and came up with all of our philosophy around love as a business strategy. We had an inside joke that really like this alternate universe kind of bizarro world, inverse of love as a business strategy is is fear as a business strategy.
Mm.
And basically like we wrote the book to try to counter that because fear from our perspective is the current business strategy. That's what we're trying to change, right? And so it shows up in everything. I mean, if you just simply imagine, anyone listening right now can do this. You can just picture somebody coming to you and saying, "Hey, there was a meeting on the calendar yesterday. We were all there. You weren't there," and like they're just letting you know that you missed a meeting yesterday. Like that moment in all of us invokes all kinds of feelings, and we don't always recognize that it's a source of fear. I mean, there's the pure just like, oh, I'm gonna get fired kind of fear, oh, I'm in trouble fear, but there's also like fear of letting people down, fear of not living up to your own standards, right? Just fear of, the impacts that creates for others. There's other types of fear that drive us and cause us to react. And I think that fear also leads to us doing things like that discomfort that it creates. Each time we face that fear, we kind of are faced with a kind of fork in the road, if you will. Just to simplify it, obviously there's more than two choices at any given time, but most of the time it gives us this choice of what we call choose your hard. So
Yeah.
there's this myth that there's an easy and there's a hard. But the reality in life is that it's all hard. It's just hard and harder. And more times than not, the hard is right in front of you, and the harder is the impacts and the consequence later if you don't choose this hard. And so you're often faced with this crossroad. Like for instance, in my example of missing a meeting, you know, the hard might be to, you know what, I apologize. I
Yeah.
missed this meeting. I messed up. Can we talk about it? Can you help me understand like how to get back on track or what I can do to make this right? The harder would be making excuses, kind of like, kind of kicking the can down the road or some sort of, just like deflection technique or any of these kind of tactics to just kind of make yourself feel safer. Kind of like, what are you talking about? What meeting? Like, oh, like I didn't do that. Someone else must have
Somebody must
moved.
have,
Yeah,
yeah.
and like all this deflection. But the harder that you pay for it down the road, first of all, those tactics are usually seen right through, or people
Yeah.
their BS meter kind of goes off, and you don't form a relationship with this person or the team that's necessary to overcome future mistakes and errors. And so
Yeah.
you become seen as less reliable, you become seen as someone who kind of skirts their way out of things, and they're not going to rely on you. And you'd also missed out on an opportunity to really show vulnerability, show courage, and show leadership or whatever it is that you need to show in that space. And so it might feel like you chose the more comfortable, easier path in the
Mm.
moment. But there's these little costs for it that we don't realize, that if we had chosen the hard, our future is much, much better. And the same is with, especially true with conflict, which happens all the time. If personal conflict, relational conflict within the workplace, it's just rampant. But we have built a culture where we're afraid to address those things, and it's not appropriate to address those things. It's like nails on a chalkboard to imagine going up to our coworker and saying, "Hey, I disagree." Like having a direct conversation about something that feels like conflict is very uncomfortable. Feedback is hard. Telling someone that they did
Mhm.
something wrong is just difficult. And so when you have all this built up environment, like I said earlier, environment that makes that difficult, nobody does it. And nobody wants to burst that bubble. And everyone wants to smile and be happy and like be friendly, but nobody wants to be honest. And nobody wants to like bring forth those realities. And we're all choosing this hard right now. That's down the road. This, you get thrust into change, you get thrust into conflict that can't be avoided, and nobody has the relationships to get through that together. Nobody has the resilience to actually come together as a team and face it. Instead, we're all busy deflecting, hiding, playing it safe,
Yeah.
and trying to point the finger at somebody else, and we fall apart. And so that's just a critical piece. That level of discomfort, to practice that, is a critical piece of what we practice and teach others. And what I do, I mean, it's imperative. Being able to have these uncomfortable moments changes everything.
Yeah, I think one of the things I learned when I was in leadership and in managing people for many years is that people don't know how to emotionally regulate enough to stay in a conversation. So what happens is that when somebody gives feedback, there's all of these difficult feelings, like you were talking about, shame, guilt, feelings of unworthiness, and people don't know how to stay in those feelings and how to, like, use compassion and use love to regulate themselves enough to know that, oh, it's not personal, so I'm going to be able to receive this and then be able to kind of process it. But I don't think that we have done enough work, or I think we were raised by people that couldn't regulate emotionally. And so we have generations of individuals that don't know how to emotionally regulate enough to have difficult conversations. And I remember in my old workplaces, people didn't want to have those conversations and people weren't truthful about things. But like you said, it's a pay now, pay later, right? Just thinking back on your journey in particular, what helped you lean into those difficult feelings? Because they can feel quite uncomfortable. Like it can feel icky and yucky. What helped you be willing to work from that place?
So, discomfort is kind of my job nowadays. I think
Mm,
as as Culture Plus has grown and evolved, what I do most days is work with leaders, teams, and companies in what we call experiences, but some call them, if you want to really boil them down, they could be called workshops, but
Yeah.
they're designed to be uncomfortable and to access those parts and practice. We call them culture practice workshops, where we're practicing that muscle of leaning into discomfort. And it's because that was the journey I had to go on. I think, as I mentioned earlier, Mohammed, our CEO, went on his own personal journey. But at no point in that early phase of his journey did he turn to us and say, here's what I'm doing. You guys need to do it too. Like you're a leader, so you also have to do this. He never did that. And in fact, that's kind of why it worked, was he was very much just doing and showing and demonstrating and leading by example. And the rest of us started, you know, learning and following and growing in that way. But that journey included a lot of those conversations naturally, not as a mechanical kind of way to fabricate anything. It was just literally like, if we're gonna if we're gonna be loving, we have to learn to be honest. And so we had these tough love conversations where it's like tough feedback given in a way that's as earnest as possible, but not avoided. And we learned very quickly that that was a key, because we hated it. It was very uncomfortable, and but every time afterwards, we felt, man, we really did grow a lot stronger after that. And
Mm.
I think we all know this. I think we all deep down know, we could all name someone in our lives that we can have these kind of conversations with, but they're just not at work. Like we're just like, just not at work. When I
Mhm.
go to work, I don't want that. I just want to do the work. I just want to go home afterwards and just like go back to my family, and I'll do all that stuff there. And we just like, for some reason, we've just gotten to this point where like, just, we don't want this at work. When we get to work, I just want to like Severance, any Severance fans, we just want to like,
Yeah, like have your brain. This
yeah,
part of my brain's going to work. This part of my brain's staying home.
yeah. But that's just crazy, right? That's wild that, because we spend more awake hours at work than we do anywhere else in our lives, with our families, with, our friends, our
Yeah.
loved ones. Like, we're spending all of our, like, most of our lives at the end will have been spent with these coworkers. And it's like, we don't get to just divorce ourselves from these realities of our lives. If we're having a bad day, it follows us into the workplace. And if we're
Yeah.
frustrated at work, it follows us back home. So it just kind of doesn't, it just, when you really break it down, it doesn't make sense to think that discomfort has no place in the workplace. Because if you ask anyone, what they would want in the workplace is harmony. You want everyone just to be harmonious. And you pass by, how are you? Great, awesome. Hope you have a great weekend, and just all this stuff. And but like underneath harmony is always this like unspoken honesty. And people have a lot of honesty to give and nowhere to put it in the workplace, nowhere to let it out.
Mm.
Like when no one's lying to each other at the workplace, but we're definitely not telling the truth, if that makes sense. There's people who have annoyed us for years, and instead we go around talking about them in ways that we may not realize. Like, oh, we want to get this done. Maybe we should give it to Giselle. It's like, oh, well, let's not give it to Giselle. Giselle, she can't be, that's just Giselle, and it's like we kind of, oh, that's just Jeff. That's just Bob. Like, these people, we just frame them up as just, that's just who they are, and no one's going to talk to them.
Yeah.
And it just becomes this culture and this like gossip and this deeper thing that grows into something. When you look back, you're like, oh my gosh, this culture is broken or horrible or something, and you can't put your finger on why. And I'll tell you, you can trace it generally back to just these little forks in the road, these little hards that weren't chosen, of just
Mm.
being more honest and less harmonious. Like, it's okay if we all kind of get upset for a little bit here, because afterwards,
Yeah.
humans are incredibly good at bouncing back from that and
Mhm.
repairing what was broken and making it stronger. It's like a muscle. You have to like tear the fibers to rebuild it stronger. Like, that's what we're doing when we're working out. We're just tearing those muscle fibers. That's what you got to
Yeah.
do with relationships. You got to break them down a little bit to uncover the strength inside them. So
And it's easier to do that when it's like micro things than waiting for it all to build up. And I will say that I had this similar experience of what you were talking about. People were seen as one dimensional characters that they were never going to change because they did something 20 years ago that nobody actually told them about. Like people just kept talking about them behind their back. And I'm like, well, did anybody ever speak to them about it? Oh, no. Even the work plans weren't honest. Like, they didn't outline exactly what behavior they needed to see in what they were doing. They were just kind of theoretical. And I'm like, well, how's a person going to change if they're not going to know exactly what it is you expect them to do? I truly believe in truth. Now, I do have a way in terms of how I communicate the truth. And I begin by giving the person the benefit of the doubt. For example, it might not be your intention, but this is the impact of what you said. You may not have meant it, but this is so I validate myself while I also give them the benefit of the doubt that maybe they didn't do it on purpose. But that doesn't matter because the impact is still whatever. And so that I find that that opens up the dialogue a little bit more. But it's so interesting to observe how we're not talking to one another in the workplace because it just feels so uncomfortable. And I just want to say one more thing that what you had said earlier before, which is really thinking about vulnerability and in coming together. We're taught that professional means emotional distance, right? Growing up, we were taught that professionalism meant emotional distance. But my experience has been that the more we do that, the more we dehumanize other people because we're not allowed to feel our emotions as difficult as they might be at work. What has been your experience in terms of what may be some other factors that lead to that dehumanization process?
Well, I think I covered an example of the big one, which is just lack of honesty over harmony.
Mhm.
I think this unspoken rule of what you're allowed to bring to the workplace is just the big killer. But one of our six pillars, we have six pillars of love, and one of them is one that I think just never gets spoken about, which is forgiveness.
Yeah.
And and you just don't hear that word in the workplace. And everything we just kind of described is actually sourced in what we call unforgiveness,
Yeah.
right? It's that 20-year ago mistake that stays with you. And, as much as we want to like just call it, oh, that was a professional mistake and whatever, there's an element of unforgiveness built into that sentiment.
Mm.
If we truly loved and cared, or you know what, even if we didn't, but we just truly thought it was a professional work skill mistake, that'd be a very easy check the box. Here's how you're supposed to do it like this next time mistake that we could just correct and move on. But the fact that it hangs with us for years and years and years and it follows our reputation means that there's more to that story, right? There's more
Mm.
to what happened. And there's hurt feelings, there's impacts that people haven't gotten over, and there's assumptions about the person's character or the person's, all these things follow it and they just go into these big balls of messy things. And what we don't talk about enough is just forgiveness.
Yeah.
Like the ability to just, yes, have the difficult conversation, but have it lead to moments of, you know what, like, I didn't know that that's where you're coming from. I didn't know. And here's where I'm coming from. And now that we can share that openly, you know what, maybe I can find it in my heart to maybe understand you in a different way and try a different thing. Like little steps towards forgiveness are never spoken about. But forgiveness, let me tell you, is hidden behind like every dollar made and lost. It's hidden behind every decision in a boardroom, in a
Mhm.
meeting, and like it's hidden behind performance reviews and decisions on who gets what project. It's hidden behind how meetings go and like how much we enjoy our work. Like it's all really, really deep behind the scenes, just hiding in the shadows because it's just there. And when you go to work, you can, I mean, if we're honest with ourselves, we can name a few people at work right now that we have some unforgiveness towards, whether
Mhm.
it's intentional by them or not. We wouldn't know unless we talk about it, but in our minds, we have it all laid out. I mean, that's the power of the human storyteller, is that we're just built to be these, historically we've evolved as a species because of our ability to tell stories about how
Mhm.
we've written them down, we turn them into movies. We're incredible storytellers, and when we don't have all the facts, that same skill turns into the ability to assume and to fill in the blanks and to We have
Yeah.
data point A and we have data point E, and somehow we can tell you exactly what B, C, and D are, even if we have no proof, evidence, or testimony around it. And so
Yeah.
that's what happens in the workplace. Like I said, we spend more time with these people than anybody else. Of course, things are going to happen. You know, conflicts arise and all these different, scenarios that come across daily. If we're not trying to have an active, level of forgiveness with each other, we are going to fall and slip into spaces of distance and stuff like it's much easier to
Yeah.
just stick to, I'm the boss, so I'm just gonna make these
Yeah.
decisions. If you don't like it, then just deal with it, just work. I don't, no tears allowed, no feelings allowed. But the reality is sometimes, like that decision you made made me feel unvalued. It made me feel hurt. And it made me feel like what I do here doesn't matter. And, like being able to say that out loud and then being able to have someone respond to it and say, whatever it is they need to say. I mean, that's a different conversation to have at work. But let me tell
Yeah.
you, from that point on, you will work very differently together. And we have this fear that it'll go really bad. Like, oh my gosh, you're gonna get into a big fight. But I
Yeah.
find that while that may be true, I'm not gonna say there's no chance that things don't escalate into
Hmm.
something uglier. More often than not, we learn something about each other and we find a more common ground because we were willing to be genuine and vulnerable and courageous with each other. We respect each other more for it. But we're just so scared of that, let's call it arbitrarily 1% chance that, things will blow up into a massive fallout that we hold back. And then, like you mentioned earlier, it does blow up one day because it can only go so long.
Yeah.
And then there's your data point there. That's why people don't want to speak up because they're like, oh, that blew up and that blew up and
Yeah.
that blew up. But they don't realize that all these blow ups are like
All
big
these
old time
other.
bombs. And
Hmm.
if you just let it go, if you just practice it every day, you'll never have the blow up. You'll just have constant little uncomfortable moments that build stronger bonds. So
Hmm. I love
yeah,
that.
again,
Yeah.
I rambled, forgot the question, but there you go.
No, no, I think you answered it perfectly. I love that you talked about forgiveness because at least the majority of workplaces that I had worked at, like that wasn't even on the radar. The way that conflict was managed or mistakes were managed was usually punitive approaches. It was like sort of like, three strikes and you're out, or but people don't learn from that. They only see themselves as victims, right? Like they don't see how the impact of their behavior or their mistake, it doesn't leave room for growth. It only feeds more fear, meaning that people then become afraid of making a mistake, and then they're more likely to hide mistakes. So they don't see how it's all interconnected, right? If I
Yes.
use punitive approaches, then people are not going to be honest. They're going to try to hide stuff, and they're more likely to make mistakes. And that's in the medical literature. The more likely that, like, for example, doctors were able to be honest about mistakes, the more likely that patients were to forgive and not necessarily sue and then get to some resolution. But it's interesting how we've gotten so far away from that humanity in the workplace. It's fascinating. You mentioned vulnerability a couple of times. People don't like to be vulnerable. How do you get your clients to kind of get past that fear of being vulnerable?
Well, I think vulnerability is one of the hardest things to do, and at the same time, one of the easiest things I think that a leader can do. Like when you say,
Mm,
where can I start? What should I do first? My first thing, like just go be vulnerable first. It's one of the easiest things you can do right now. Everyone can right now go be vulnerable. And one core thing of being vulnerable is just recognizing your own weakness. I think sometimes we feel like vulnerability is going to require some sort of huge, deep outpouring of our deepest, darkest secret or some sort of big reveal.
mm,
But vulnerability sometimes is just, hey, I don't know the answer to this. I need help.
yeah.
I messed up. Like, and that's so hard to say in the workplace that I messed
Hmm.
up. That's my fault. Because it's like, why would I admit to that? Why, like, I'd rather find all the reasons why I made the right decision and it just happened to be somebody else or happened to be some situation or it's the economy or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
But to just straight out say like, I made a mistake, period. No excuses, no other like things, and be real about it, to genuinely share that. That's the very core of vulnerability. And you can
Hmm.
practice that today. And like I said, it's hard as hell.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to do that, but it's also very easy. It's like straightforward. It's like there's no other steps to it. It's like step one, admit your mistake. Step two, nothing else. Like you're done. And so, when it comes to practicing that or helping others practice that, I think you have to, everything that a lot of our fears are rooted in belief, right? They're rooted in, if I say this, then I believe that they are going to respond this way. And
Hmm.
our beliefs are they're scientifically and like kind of evolutionarily built into us to protect us. Like
Yeah.
I believe that if I, leave my front door open, then I'm inviting danger and strangers into my house, which is not safe. Like we have beliefs that are good for us, but we also have beliefs that are no longer serving us that we hang on to. And I think that's what comes into play. That's what comes in the way of vulnerability being more practiced more regularly, is that we have beliefs that if we show that side of ourselves, we'll be judged, that we'll be criticized, that we'll be ostracized or whatever it is. Those are formed in beliefs. And so science has shown that the way to change a belief is through experiences. Like our beliefs are formed through experiences. Something's
Yeah.
happened to us. We've experienced something that creates that belief. So the way to change it is, you can't just tell people, hey, you're wrong about your belief. You have to experience something different. And so that's why we do what we do, actually, like our culture practice workshops and really everything we do. We never go and just say, here's step one, step two, step three, here's all the things you're doing wrong. Like it's never like that. It has
Yeah.
to be a real experience. And so if I'm helping a leader really access vulnerability, we're going to be genuinely bringing up conflicts that exist in
Mm.
like currently, and then having you and your colleagues address it, and we'll coach you through it. Like we'll be there to moderate it and to show you that, it give you kind of a safer way to get through it. But when
Mm.
you get through it and realize, oh wow, I just talked about something I've been really, I was never going to talk about that ever. I would take it to my grave, but I just said it out loud and it was received, and I'm alive, and we can all be adults about it and we can all appreciate it. That's when you start unraveling this belief, like, oh, so it's not the end of the world. Like, and I do feel a lot better getting it off my chest. And I really respected how they responded. Like these little experiences we have then
Yeah.
start chipping away at these beliefs we have, until you can get to a point where, you know what, and it's never going to get easy. Just to be clear, vulnerability will never be easy, but you do at least get to a point where you recognize that it's worth the work. And it is the easier of the hards to choose at any given time. And that's where we want to get to, right? A strong culture is not one that's perfect and happy and rainbows and butterflies all the time. A strong culture is one that's actually kind of tough, rough around the edges and kind of raw and real. So the strongest cultures are those who are like kind of in it, kind of, going at it at times. But that's because we're unwilling to let those things kind of just sit idly and become unforgiveness. We will fight for a good culture, and that takes work.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah,
And it takes courage.
a
Yeah.
lot. Yes.
So, as we're coming to the end, I wanted to talk about leadership, because the model that we have, at least that I grew up with, was that power over, like doesn't show errors and mistakes. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing sort of dying off. What is your perspective on what real power is, and how's that changed over time?
Right. So power has been categorized into two different types. There's personal power, and then there's, oh gosh, I forgot the term itself.
Is it systemic?
It's like, okay, I don't want to hang on too long to it, but
Yeah,
basically
it's okay.
the two types of power, there's power that you can wield because you're given it. And if you were to lose that title, position, authority, you no longer have the power. And then there's personal types of power, which they follow you wherever you go. Like they are part of
Mm.
you. They can't be taken away from you. And I think it's really important to understand that power is not good or evil. on its own.
Mm.
It is not inherently flavored in one way or the other. It's like a hammer. You can use it to destroy something, or you can use it to build something as well. And it's
Mm.
how we use power that creates this idea of good, bad leadership and all this other stuff,
Yeah.
right? And so on one end of the power spectrum, you have like coercive power, reward power, legitimate power. Like, you know what? I'm the CEO. I have the power to hire and fire and give bonuses and all this other stuff. And this is that power that, you can wield good or evil, right? You can say
Yeah.
you can use it in ways that are not too good, or you can use it in ways that
Healthy or
really, really,
unhealthy.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Mm.
But then you have these personal types of power. And I think this is where leadership is it's just been missing for a very long time. So when we talk about bringing humanity back to the workplace, and you look at leadership, we're looking to try to build a generation or a future of leaders where this is the type of power that's valued, expected, and wielded in the right way more often than the others. There's always a place for those legitimate types of power, but the personal types of power, which is like your expertise and your influence, right? Your power to be influential, and it's called referent power essentially, which is where people follow you because like you're a leader because you're followed. A lot of times when we work with a lot of businesses,
Yeah.
we don't call their managers leaders. We say they're managers because leaders have to be followed. Like you have to earn leadership. And that's because this referent power comes by way of essentially being liked, if you will, but basically respected and followed for who you are and how you hold yourself and how you handle situations. Sometimes we have a problem at work or some sort of thing that and we'll call up a friend, or we'll call up a trusted mentor that has no expertise or knowledge in the situation at all, but we really want to hear what they have to say about it. And that's kind of referent power at work, because you want to follow kind of what they think and feel about it because you respect them in that way and you feel that way about them. And this type of power, again, can be good or evil, just to be clear. It's not inherently good or
Yeah.
bad. There's referent power, if you look at like Mobs or Mean Girls, if you watch that movie,
Yeah.
that's referent power in play, clicks and like, things used in like bad ways. In fact, some of your worst culture kind of situations might have some referent power in play in terms of people who are causing this toxic culture to get worse and worse because they are kind of rallying people through leadership, through this power to be more toxic, to be more gossipy, to be more, all that. So I think understanding these types of power is super important as a leader, and to ask yourself, I have to ask myself this all the time, what type of power am I wielding at any given time in a situation?
Yeah.
And I think we've gotten really comfortable at just wielding our kind of big coercive reward. Like, like sometimes we feel like, oh, I want culture to get better. So instead of doing coercive power, I'm going to do reward power. And it's like that because that's so much better. But reward power can just as easily be kind of
Wanted.
abused,
Hmm.
misused. It
Hmm.
has terrible outcomes sometimes. It could be good, but
Yeah.
it doesn't make it like it doesn't change culture if that's still the type of power people are following. What really morphs culture is when people start, kind of like in my example with Muhammad, like behaving differently, showing up differently, treating
Mm.
people differently. And you think of someone, when you start thinking of someone as a human and thinking of them differently, now you're talking about real impacts and real changes, because I don't just view it as a job anymore. I view it as a relationship. I view it as a team, as coming together and
Yeah.
really, really working together. And that, I mean, that changes
Hmm.
everything, everything, everything.
When Muhammad became the lighthouse, right? That people followed, right?
Yes.
Like through his behavior, his willingness to change. And he became that lighthouse that other people went, hey, wait a minute. I'd
Yeah.
like to be like that lighthouse, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, a couple more questions. The first one is, what is your definition of love? Be unconditional love or love. Sometimes people get stuck on the word unconditional. So, what's your definition?
Ooh. I had a whole on my podcast, I had a guest that came and did a whole episode on definition of love. And I learned a lot because love is a super loaded word that we use in English to mean a lot of different things. Whereas he was bringing about like in like Greek, there's like and I forget, I have to go back and look, but I think
Eros?
there's like six or seven words for love, depending on
Mm.
what, like there's the love for
There's
like a
agape. Is that
romantic
correct?
love. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah,
agape,
exactly.
eros. Yeah. Hmm.
Yes, and it's like all these. There's like the friendship type love. There's the
Hmm.
love of like a food or like a
Yeah.
activity. And so when we say love, just to be clear, we are not talking about the romantic, obviously. We're not talking about all that. But what we are talking about is, and the reason we use our sports story as an analogy is because this love is doing things out of care for others. And if you look at some of the strongest like sports team analogies, those real like gritty winning teams, it's because those players go out in the field to fight for each other, not for themselves or some other purpose, right?
Mm. Yeah.
And a lot of people are like, "Oh, I love, my workplace is pretty cool. We are like, we're like a family." And I cringe. I'm like,
Yeah.
because I'm like,
Definitely.
"Ooh, is that what you want though?" Because we don't get to pick our family, we don't get to choose, we don't get to lead. Like,
Yeah. Families can be
yeah,
dysfunctional. Yeah.
yeah, families can be very dysfunctional.
Mm.
Um, and that's where you're almost obligated into a family. You're stuck in a family at times. But then you look at like a team where we choose to be there, we tried out to be there, we earned our spot there, and then we have a common goal and we look to our left and our right and we're pulling each other forward together. That kind of love and care, putting your heart in, someone else's hands, that's the kind of love we're talking about. I know I'm getting very like philosophical about it,
Oh,
not
it's
less,
great.
it's not
Hmm.
concrete, but that's the
Hmm.
kind of love that we're talking about because that kind of love also includes accountability. And I think
Yeah.
that's super important because when we first went on our journey to try to figure out love, man, we swung that pendulum so far the wrong way. It just became, for a moment, it was like just nice. It was just being nice and soft and quote
Yeah.
unquote caring all the time. So if someone had a little cough, oh, we love you. Please go home. Go home. You're sick. We'll take care of it from here. Just go. We love you. Oh my gosh. And then they go home and we look around. We're like, do any of you know how to do that person's job? I don't know how to do that job. And then we all just fail
Yeah.
together. That's not love. That's sympathy. But then we learn that real love is actually, you know what? Like we have to have tougher conversations. We have to be a little more real with
Yeah.
each other. And that takes more than just, soft, gushy feelings.
Yeah. Absolutely. Love that. Authenticity is love. Love that.
Yes. Yes.
So, final question. Where can people find you? Where can people work with you? What do you want to share with the audience about your work?
Sure. Absolutely. If you enjoyed my voice for whatever reason, you can hear as much of it as you want at Love and the Love as a Business Strategy podcast, which is available
Hmm.
on all major podcasting. But if you want to also learn more about what we're doing, you can go to loveasastrategy.com because we have Love as a Business Strategy, which is our first Wall Street Journal bestseller. But later this year, I don't know when you'll be posting this, but basically October of 2025, we should be coming out with Love as a Change Strategy, which is it's our follow up to the book. And we're very proud of that. A lot of really good stories in that one. So follow along for those books. If you want to check out, go to loveasastrategy.com to check out like information on both of those. And if you're interested in kind of just the actual work we do, if you're like a business interested in kind of finding out more about the programs and practicing culture with us, you can go to culture-plus.com, which is weird because it's like culture minus plus.com, but it's culture hyphen plus.com.
Hmm. .com.
So yeah, check us out. You can find me on LinkedIn or anything. And I hope to hear from some of you.
Yes. Thank you so much for being on the show and sharing your wisdom. And thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Love and Compassion podcast with Giselle. Have a great day.
Thank you.